Tired of spending money on fad diets, weight loss drugs, and ineffective weight loss products? If you're looking for a way to lose weight and improve your metabolic health, Golo could be a great solution for you. The team at Golo created a patented all-natural dietary supplement called LIS, which is clinically proven to work. LIS is made of 7 plant-based ingredients and 3 key minerals that help to reverse insulin resistance and improve metabolic health. LIS by Golo naturally stimulates your body's GLP-1 hormone production without synthetic and expensive meds that aren't always covered by insurance. This helps to curb appetite and balance blood sugar levels. More than 5,000 doctors have recommended Golo to their patients. It's a comprehensive weight loss solution that's safe, easy, and clinically proven to work. With taking just 1 to 3 LIS capsules daily, you'll quickly get control of your metabolic health within 30 days. For a happier, healthier you, visit Golo.com to get started on a more energetic version of yourself and enjoy 10% off with the code KateCasey10. That's Golo.com, code KateCasey10 for 10% off. One more time, go to GOLO.com and use code KateCasey10 to join more than 5 million people who have switched to Golo as a better way to lose weight.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. 1 purchased equals 1 donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code Wondery for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code Wondery at checkout.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey, and welcome back for this Saturday series episode. Over the course of over 1,200 episodes, I've covered plenty of cults and even personality profiles of gurus. With a cult, you can have a devastating impact on families. It can cause severe disruption and alienation between family members. There can be significant psychological distress due to the intense control, isolation, and manipulation tactics that are employed by cult leaders. Family bonds are broken because the loyalty is to the cult leader and not to the children or the spouse, which in many cases cause irreparable damage. A cult leader demands absolute loyalty and often isolates followers from the outside world. Gurus, however, are considered spiritual teachers. Sometimes where there is wisdom and guidance for personal and spiritual development, there can still be levels of power dynamics and potential for harmful manipulation. A guru can foster unhealthy dependence and blind devotion in followers. When individuals relinquish critical thinking and personal responsibility, it can place excessive power and authority in the hands of a single person. And that's a slippery slope between providing spiritual support and exploiting that trust for personal gain. Because becoming a guru can give a narcissist exactly what they need to satisfy their desires: adoration without question or consequence. My guest today is the daughter of a guru, someone that dressed like Jesus in white robes and had flowing hair and a beard, a self-anointed expert on health. The author of a book about why cancer is good for you, if you can imagine. Her mother was a bohemian and married her father, and she would learn later that he fathered 9 children, one that contacted her in the weeks before her own wedding. I love this discussion because it explores how one can navigate a world in which your parent believes their role is a spiritual leader. And as a spiritual leader, it was more important than being a present parent and the mother who would be blindly devoted to him. My guest is Liz Thomas. She is a brand builder and digital strategist, and she's the editor and founder of Womanhood Unwrapped, where she curates real, unfiltered conversations. She's also the co-host of Stages of She podcast. Here is my interview with Liz. So Liz Thomas and I met because I was a guest on her podcast. And at the end of it, she mentioned that she should write a memoir and that she had a crazy family story. And I thought, well, buckle up, girl. I'm your girl. I'm here for it. So I was very eager to have you as a guest on the show. And I'm so glad you're here today.
Me too.
Tell me where this story begins. Where did you grow up? And tell me about your family.
Yeah. So let's see. Gosh, I always think about this because I always think like, if I were to write a book about this, where would I start? Mm-hmm. But I like to start with my parents' origin story because it's kind of interesting. So my mom grew up in Southern California, Orange County, and she really was like overtaken by the hippie generation. So kind of free love, and moved to Oregon with her boyfriend of the time and came to a place called Idlewild, which I don't know if anyone will know where that is, but it's in the mountains above Palm Desert on a like spring break to spend some time with her mom who was living there, my grandma, who I adore. She's no longer with us. And she was working at a health food store there. And all of a sudden one day she sees this white horse walk up to the outside of the store, and this man get off the white horse who has long dark hair and a big dark beard and come in, and he ordered an orange juice, and she was so enamored with him that she just started like pouring the orange juice all over the counter. And 6 months later, or 9 months, depending on the story, I was born.
Well, when you mentioned that she had spent some time in Oregon, was she with the Rajneeshis?
No. So she was probably more of a, what would the word be? Like, she was a hippie who was on the track to become like an early childhood educator. Her boyfriend of the time was in law school. So like, kind of dabbling. And then when she met my dad, he already was on this mission in life to create what he always wanted, was this like vegetarian utopian community, is what he would call it, where everyone was very healthy, didn't really go to doctors, used herbs and diet to stay healthy. And most of my childhood was some mix of trying to make that happen.
Do you think that that was born of having their own parents who were born of a time where they were trying to cope with war? Everything was sort of controlled and measured. And so the exploration of one's spirituality was a byproduct of growing up in homes that were far more structured.
Yes, I definitely believe that. My father was raised in Buffalo, New York. He's full Italian. His parents were first generation, very Catholic, very regimented. His father was a police officer. I think he might have even been like the chief of police. And my nanny worked in a local factory. So like very regimented upbringing. And he was supposed to be a doctor, which my nanny reminded him he didn't do till the day she died. And he was halfway through his medical school experience in New York, and his dad got lung cancer because he was a smoker and died. And my dad was so appalled at the system and how at that time, which this would have been, I think, early 70s. So like it was not great care. There was not a solution for cancer other than to poison people and hope they live, right? So he dropped out of school, moved to California, and went to a naturopathic school instead. So that was kind of what started his journey with health.
So your parents, you are conceived, but they are not married at this point.
They were not. And the interesting side story that is a thread through all of this is that my dad married his high school girlfriend and had 3 kids, and then they did not work out. So he moved to California, and he would admit this himself, that he was not the best father or husband. He always had a mission, and we all kind of came along with it. And in a 10-year period of time, he ended up having a couple more kids, one with a woman he did not marry, couple, and then one brother who we found a week before I got married, or he found us. And then he met my mom, and they were the most successful relationship of his kind of time exploring romantic relationships. They were married for 15 years. They got married right after my mom conceived me. They ultimately got divorced, but they're still actually really close friends. So they just were very volatile as a married couple. And he has 9 children. So with 4 different women.
Did they have any more children after you together?
Yes, I have two younger sisters, so that are full blood sisters.
So from the time that you were a child, you knew of the children from the high school girlfriend, and there were how many of them?
Three.
Three. So in between that relationship and your mother, he had how many children?
Three more.
But your mother knew of only how many children?
She knew of, we only didn't know of one. And we kind of knew he existed because he had gotten a letter one time, but had no like return address. So we knew there was a Michael floating around out there that might be his son. And Michael found us the week I was getting married, wanted to come to the wedding. He did not come.
Well, let's walk that back for a second. So how does that feel for you? I mean, I grew up in a house where I was very cognizant that my mom had been married before, and I have two half sisters and one biologically full sister. So it does make for a complicated story when you're young to explain to others. So what was that like for you? You have parents that were not married until after you were conceived, and you have these other siblings that exist somewhere in the world. Did you have any feelings of embarrassment or shame about that?
I didn't when I was younger. So I was kept really sheltered, which is a story in itself. My sisters and I were homeschooled until I was in 5th grade, and we like begged to go to school. So that was when I kind of entered the world and started to have exposure to people judging our family. I really was never exposed to anyone who would have a negative opinion about us before that time. But, you know, everyone has their story, right? I'm close to one of my half sisters now that were older. And I'm really close to one of my half brothers who kind of grew up around me and with us. But the story always was, it was always kind of someone else's fault that we didn't have relationships with those children. And I'm sure to some degree that was true, but you know, as you get older and have your own children, it becomes clear that our parents are not saints. And there was, you know, what I would consider a lot of abandonment. Yeah.
What was your opinion of the older children? Did you feel connected to them at all when you were growing up?
I was really intrigued by my older half sister. Her mother had taken her and her brother and moved to North Carolina when I was conceived, because there was a weird overlap with him being with her and then being with my mother. So I feel like she just removed them, and we would get school pictures once a year. And Sarah was really interesting to me. I really wanted to know her. So I kind of had this story in my head of what she would be like. Now that we're older, we've reconnected and we have a good relationship, but it's interesting because there's these gaps where like she had a completely, you know, she felt differently about all these different things than I did. So that's what I would say about that is I wanted a relationship. I didn't really know one of my sisters and my brother until I was older. And then my dad's first set of kids, my brother Kenny is like I would just consider him a full blood brother because he lived with us on and off from the time he was 13. The really sad, traumatic thing that happened that I do think also affected a lot of decisions my dad made is that his middle son from that first marriage was hit by a car when he was 13 and died.
Wow.
And my oldest sister and my brother Kenny grew up missing a brother, basically, you know, who had been taken very suddenly and in a really sad way. And I think it was just affected everything. So I do not have a good relationship really with anyone else, particularly my eldest sister and my brother who discovered us. I just don't speak to them.
What was your mom's relationship with those children? Because it sounds to me like a lot of the volatility had to do with her feeling of insecurity, because here's a man who's sort of a wanderer. And it's hard when you have children, as much as you want to have this hippie lifestyle, the reality of structure that is required when parenting, that would seem to me that it would create a lot of conflict because she's trying to raise you and then she has all of these additional relationships she's trying to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. I cannot think of another human being who could have dealt with it the way my mom did. She always was able to make everything feel fun and feel like an adventure, even though, half the time we had no money and we were making gifts because we didn't have the finances to buy them. And my dad would be gone for weeks at a time, searching out something and then come home with some random people. So I think she did a really good job of making all of that seem exciting as opposed to scary. I've dealt in my adult life with a lot of residual feelings about the whole thing now that I'm older, have children, and know how dangerous a lot of it was. But I never felt that as a child. I felt like this is us. This is, my dad is revered by a lot of groups of people as like a guru in a lot of different ways. So there was always this like enamorment around my family. And I think that's how it was presented to us kids.
Well, certainly, because there are people that he's bringing in and out of the home. They're just probably enticed by everything that he does and says, yet he's lacking a real connection to his children in a meaningful and important way. That must have driven your mother crazy.
It ultimately was why they didn't work out, because it was her on his adventure always. And it was not a safe one. So, there was not financial security. There was not a lot of fundamental things. We actually used to have this running joke that like we were traveling around and living in a Shasta trailer until I believe my mom got pregnant with my youngest sister. And she looked at my dad. We were somewhere in San Diego or Mexico. We used to go all around looking for land for a community. And she was like, yeah, Star, we need a house. And that was where she put her foot down. And we stayed in Idlewild after that. But that was her big requirement.
This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. A lot of you are starting new rituals for the new year. Whatever you do, you can come into your own way with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV. I have to say my favorite flavor is the new Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free Raspberry Lemonade because it's a bright, zero sugar, flavor combining notes of ripe, freshly picked raspberries and citrusy, zesty lemon. I just take the pack and I pour it into a large glass of ice cold water and I knock it back and I feel like $1,000,000 and my skin, it looks so much better and it really gets me going on my day. I think you're going to love it too. I love the benefits. I like feeling like I'm hydrated all day long. And if you're somebody who's outdoors or plays sports, this is an absolute must-have. So listen, break the mold and own your ritual. Just one stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. So embrace your ritual with extraordinary hydration from Liquid IV and get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code Kate Casey at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Kate Casey at liquidiv.com.
Behind the delivery trucks that keep your life stocked, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People bringing a new offshore production platform online. People making our refineries capable of more, like making renewable diesel from agricultural waste. People trading and shipping fuels to our customers. And people helping truckers fill up and get maintenance at our convenient locations. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
Did he have what was his persona? Because when you speak of people that were adoring him, what were some of his values? What were some of his beliefs? What was this persona that he created? Who was he born as and who did he become?
Yeah, that's a really good question. He was born Richard. He was known as Dickie growing up. Gioeli, that's my maiden name, in Buffalo, New York. Lots of cousins, lots of that all around. When he was going through his transition to being like this health and spirituality guru, he changed his name to Amadeus Star Gioeli. Always kept very proud in our family of our heritage of being Italian. So, that was always retained, the last name. But he goes by A Star. And I have been in places that you would not believe and told people where I grew up, and they will ask me, "Oh, do you know Star?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my dad."
What is it that he believes in?
So one of his big missions in life was to change the conversation around cancer and what it means to have cancer, why people get cancer. And most of his research, he wrote a book about it. It was accurate. I mean, now people understand that your body is trying to create a new organ, and that is partly what cancer is it's your body trying to deal with all these toxins from our diet and healthcare and all these different things. And that's where cancer can stem from. But when he wrote this book and he was beating that drum in the 80s, nobody believed him. They thought he was absolutely nuts, except this sect of people who revered him. So that was one piece. And then he also has always been a musician and an artist. And so many, many people, like his day job was creating beautiful water fountains for people with these rocks he would create from scratch that looked like real granite. And, he subsequently trained my brother, who now has a very successful career in that industry in construction and landscaping. But that was how he made money. His passions were always music and healing cancer.
But what is his significant background so that when he spoke to these groups, what was his background that he was qualified to talk about these topics?
He's not. That's the short. I mean, he went to half of medical school, one half, and didn't graduate. And then he went to a naturopathic school in California that I can't tell you the name. Mm-hmm. And I think he has a certificate from there, but most of it, he would say, was self-education.
And nobody seemed to have an issue with that he was not really qualified to speak about matters relating to cancer and health.
Anyone who has a mainstream ideology did. Yeah. Most of the people I grew up with did, because we grew up in a small town. So it was like one half hippies who were trying to escape the city and one half third generation Hicks who didn't want anything to do with my family. So I kind of grew up in a weird split environment.
At what point in his life did any relative, I don't know if anyone has kind of shared this with you, but where there seemed to be a disconnect with the old and with the new, and how frustrating it must have felt for them, and namely your mother, to see that the attention that he received from all of this was more important than the work required to raise a child?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. So my mom was very resentful for a lot of years after they separated, and she had to go back to school. We spent some time on welfare because, as would have it, my dad would send money, but it was never enough to cover what we needed. But he was gone, for long periods of time. So I think that there was always questioning. I, in particular, started questioning the whole plan and infrastructure of my family at about age 7. But I also think my mom really liked the persona and liked the fact that she was the wife to this guru person. That lasted a very long time when it could have probably ended and changed much sooner if she hadn't. She's still, I think, my dad is the love of her life. So,
well, that's quite difficult because she's struggling to raise you, and she's still tethered to this creation of a person who just sort of probably exemplified everything that she was looking for in the world at that point of time. She was a seeker. And when you seek and you find somebody who seems to have all those same connections, the emotional, spiritual, intellectual connection, but the reality then of raising children, it must have felt like she was living in two different worlds.
Yeah, I would imagine it did. And it definitely affected her health and, long-term ability to manage stress and all of that. She's had a lot of health difficulties in her older life.
And the irony of that too, because she's looking to him for health answers. What about her relatives? Were they enraged by what had happened for you and your siblings?
Her dad was, but her mom and dad were divorced and he lived out of the state. So there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, we never saw my grandpa growing up. I think he just did not support the marriage or that being what she chose. My grandmother was, my mom is the ultimate optimist in a lot of ways. She sees the world through rose-colored glasses. And my grandma was the exact same way. They were like cut of the same cloth. So my dad, my grandma, and my mom were like, they loved each other. They all got along. They were very close. You know, frankly, my dad is so much older than my mom that I think he was only like 12 years younger than my grandma and 12 years older than my mom. Yeah. And his eldest daughter was only 10 years older than my mom. So you can just wrap your head around that.
So maybe it was a relationship more where it was almost quasi-fatherly, like she looked to him for the answers.
Oh, I believe, yeah, definitely for a long time till it wasn't. Yeah.
The younger siblings, now you're raised in this town. You said you were homeschooled until you were in 5th grade. Were they also raised or homeschooled until that time?
Yeah, but they were younger. So I entered school in 5th grade. My sister, who is less than 2 years younger than me, entered in 3rd. And then my youngest sister started in kindergarten.
And what is that like when you go to other people's houses and you start to explain your own family story? Did you have a sense of concern, disbelief, confusion, shame, any of that?
Definitely all of it. I started coming up, you know, my sister and I were talking about this recently, that we all became really good liars because, you know, you paint the story you want to paint, and we would pick pieces to tell, pieces not to tell. I got to a point in my young life around like 7th grade where I just really wanted my parents to separate because I felt like that would solve all problems.
Yeah.
It didn't, obviously, but yeah.
How did it affect you as you began to create friendships and then romantic relationships? Because you're around these two people who are somewhat disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
And are not really able to provide you with the emotional and certainly the financial needs that you have.
So I always say this. I think the thing that saved me was I felt responsible for my 2 younger sisters. I felt like I was the one who would be the even keel, right? The even, because my parents fought all the time. There was lots of volatility. And so I started working when I was 13 and I changed my entire friend group. I kind of disassociated from my family to a degree, so I could be a part of this group in the town we grew up in that was like the normies, right? If you look at AA speak. And that was how I constructed my whole persona and really have a lot of my adult life is I'm a hard worker. I worked my way through school. It took me 7 years. I actually moved out when I was 18 and took my 16-year-old sister with me. We lived in a studio apartment in Laguna Beach and I helped her finish high school.
Wow.
And it just was like, I'm going to do this and I'm a bulldog and that's how I operate. But going back to the time when I was trying to figure that out, like, who am I in all of this? I was really angry. And so I acted out a lot. And, you know, there was one night I remember I snuck out and was gone till 2 a.m. with very safe friends, but all boys. And they dropped me off at home and my dad came running down the stairs, jumped in his old jalopy and chased them around my hometown for like an hour and a half trying to catch them so that he could give them the once over. But I did a lot of stuff to like make him upset at that time.
Well, that's extraordinary to be 18 years old. You've got a studio apartment, your 16-year-old sister. You're doing all the paperwork. There's also a younger sibling.
Yeah.
I find that when I talk to people who are the oldest of a family of difficult circumstances, that sometimes the younger children then treat the oldest sibling almost as the parent. And then they feel a sense of abandonment when you move out and you start to begin your life, as if you're supposed to stay and take care of them as a parent, which is unfair. So did that complicate your relationship with the youngest sibling?
She is an incredible human being. It never has with her.
Wow.
My middle sister and I have a much more complicated existence. And I think there's been a lot of resentment. I moved to Oregon with my husband in part because he really wanted some separation. He saw how responsible I was for the family and wanted me to like have a life, which was a very kind and wise move for us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always been a sense of resentment that I did that, I think, because I was the problem solver. So my youngest sister got pregnant as soon as I left, pretty much, and dropped out of high school.
How old was she when she got pregnant?
16.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, within 2 years of me being gone. And I've always just kind of wished I would have taken both my sisters with me, but she's created her life. She has 3 kids and all with the same person. They're still married. And she's had a really, really tough life and not a lot of support.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of respect for her.
So from 18, you move out. What was the trajectory from there up into the point between that point of leaving your home and meeting your husband? Because we know that there was a brother that contacts you the week of your wedding, before your wedding. So what happens in between there?
Well, I had a couple years where I just went absolutely nuts and had sex with every guy that I possibly could. And then I had too much responsibility on my plate with my sister. So I just like was letting loose in every other area of my life, failed out of my first year of school. And then I fortunately met my husband at 20, and he was in a real big transition, had dropped out of school in Oregon, moved to California to figure out his life. We were both at community college. And I always say we saved each other. Like we found each other and we were each other's lifeline. And we were together for 9 years before we got engaged and then got married and went through a lot, grew up a lot. But he's really the person who taught me how to take care of myself because I didn't know. I was like going to be a totally codependent doormat for the rest of my life, probably, and never graduate and just be serving the family would be my anticipation.
Now, I wonder too, was it difficult when you meet his family because you have to explain, these are my people. This is where I come from.
It was. And that's another story for another podcast sometime. We needed each other. We both came from dysfunctional family upbringings. His was just entirely different than mine. It was based on old money and responsibility. And I was actually welcomed in with open arms because everyone was so excited that he finally had someone to control him and that they could control, because I was just so grateful to be a part of a family that seemed normal. So that was, they would have been fine with us getting married at 20. Thank God we didn't do that.
Yeah.
But we've had to really kind of carve our own course and figure out what is it in life that we want. Mm-hmm. And really neither of our families have been very helpful with that.
What kind of career path did you begin in and end up in then?
So I've always been a writer. I love to write. I was published during college for a short piece I did. And my goal has always been to be an author, and I'm working towards that still. But I went into marketing because that was the way to make money and change my destiny. And I've been doing that ever since. I worked in a number of agencies, worked for brands, and then finally started my own firm, which I still own. And I love it. I work with a lot of different types of clients. And then I have a blog that's my personal kind of passion on the side.
As you write your life story, you're far from finished. Are you looking to close the book on your job? Maybe turn a page in your career? Be continued at the Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. Our professional master's degrees and certificates are designed to meet you where you are and take you where you want to go. At Georgetown SCS, the learning never stops, and neither do you. Write your next chapter. Be continued at scs.georgetown.edu/podcast.
Looking for the ultimate night out? Experience the action from a luxury suite at Capital One Arena. Watch Ovechkin chase history as the Capitals hit the ice, or catch the Wizards take on the NBA's best. Rock out with Disturbed, vibe with Mary J. Blige, or dance the night away with Kylie Minogue. Premium seating, VIP service, and unforgettable moments all under one roof. Book your suite now at CapitalOneArena.com/premier. Capital One Arena. Watch in style, live in the moment.
And then how many kids did you have together?
We have two, boy and girl.
Boy and girl.
Yeah.
So take me back to the week of the wedding. And in the run up to the wedding, are you having some sort of trepidation about a family event where all of these relatives are not only together and with you, but then friends and in-laws and everyone's together?
Yeah, always. Yeah. I think my whole existence, and this is probably what I've spent most of my 30s and my 40s trying to work through, is being the person who's like, okay, is everybody okay? Right? Because every environment I walk into where my family is involved, it's a management opportunity in my experience. So yeah, I was very nervous. I think it definitely overshadowed the wedding and the dynamics. You know, it was two families coming together. One where my parents are the outliers. Most of the people in my mom's family are very straight and narrow. Most of them are in Alcoholics Anonymous because they had some crazy time when they were young and don't drink anymore. And so very regimented. And then my husband's family, who were like these insane partiers, heavy drinkers, all coming together for that day.
So talk to me about the moment you find out about this other brother.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how I actually got the call, but I think it was my dad, and he called me and he said, Michael found me. And I'm like, who's Michael? He's like, remember when you were like younger and I'd talk about this son I thought I had?
I mean, how selfish to do this to you days before your wedding.
Oh, well, that was
par for the course.
Yeah. And my dad has this amazing ability to be exactly where you need him to be in the midst of any kind of disaster. So like he is the king of that. I mean, he is the problem solver in moments of stress. He has this very calm energy. This is why so many people gravitate to him, is he just has this ability to take over the presence of a room. So like he gets away with a lot because of that, and has with everyone his whole life, including me.
And by the way, on the wedding invitation, do you write A star?
Oh yeah, that's his name.
Wow.
Yeah. So so then Michael wanted my number and he got it. And this is actually the weirdest story of this whole family. He started calling me. So it probably wasn't a week before the wedding. It was like 3 weeks, because it led up to the week before the wedding. Me and my husband, fiance at the time, realizing this guy has something going on. We don't know what, but it's not good. And he was really obsessed with me for some reason. He kept calling and wanting to spend hours on the phone with me. And it felt very odd. So I kindly told him he wasn't coming to the wedding, and I've really never talked to him since. I just blocked his number.
Wow. And none of the other relatives have a relationship with him, could provide you any context?
Yeah. They, I mean, you know, there's these things we talk about in my family and things that just nobody talks about. And one of the things nobody talks about are the people who don't have relationships with people for whatever reason. So, you know, my dad brought him up. He does still sometimes. And I just go, great. I don't want to see him. And that's it.
Well, when you did talk to him, how much did he share about his life? Did he have a relationship with A star at all?
He didn't before finding us at all. And then I don't ask a lot of questions. I think over the years they've stayed in touch. I don't think they have a very close relationship now.
Yeah. It's hard too when it's somebody else's life. I find too that there are things, just like you said, where I just don't ask the question, because asking the question opens myself up to a space that it doesn't serve me at all.
There are certain situations I avoid because I'm scared, and I've learned over time I need to engage with because they actually are helping. And then there's ones I've learned I need to just stay out of because it doesn't help anyone. And it definitely does not help me or my kids or my husband. So
here you are, the parent of 2 children, and your kids are, going to get older and they start to ask questions. What has been the most perplexing part of that? In other words, how have you navigated or attempted to navigate revealing the story of your life and the story of your family to 2 children who are being born into a completely different family situation?
I feel like my parents did a couple things really well that I've taken into my parenting. And those are that they always loved us. They really did, and still do, unconditionally love us. There are all these other hangups, but I never felt a lack of love from either parent. And they were always, or at least my mom was always honest, very honest about a lot of things that at the time I probably thought were too much or, too overwhelming. But frankly, as I've gotten older, I've realized were good things for me to know. Right. And I've taken the same approach with my kids where I don't share information that doesn't serve them, but I've tried my very best with my family and with my hangups and with the things that I'm trying to change as I raise them to just be honest and say, they've asked me many times because I'll explain something like, oh, well, I didn't have that opportunity when I was a kid, right? Like sports, for example. That was not something that I really had access to. And so I didn't play any sports. And my kids both play sports. So they'll ask questions and I don't have answers for how to do this thing or whatever. And then they'll ask more questions. And I'm always just that's why it's really special to be able to do something like this. And I just try to turn it into something that they can appreciate versus either be embarrassed about me, feel like they just have an expectation that these things just happen for every kid.
Do you find that you're sensitive to the way people can become enamored with somebody, given your life experience?
Very sensitive. Yes. Yeah. In fact, it comes up a lot where someone will have some tangent they're going on with some guru or and I am such a pessimist with that stuff. Not maybe realist would be a better word, but just I don't believe most people have spiritual abilities or, I'm sure there are people out there that do, but the ones who are ringing the bell are definitely not them, in my opinion. They have an ego and they have an agenda.
Has it been hard to find things in your dad that you admire because your childhood was so painful?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love that question. I feel like someone who has had a similar upbringing would ask that. So thank you. There are so many things I love about my dad. What I find harder is the things that make me really angry at him. And I feel guilty for those feelings, even though they're very valid and very real. I always am able to somehow find an excuse for him. And that's something I'm working on. My mom will probably never listen to this, but if she does, she would be heartbroken because she has this idea of our relationship that frankly does not exist and has really never existed. But again, it comes down to those rose-colored glasses. I have a lot of resentment there, being the oldest of her children and the one who was left to pick up the pieces a lot. And I now have a lot of respect for her too, because it could have been a lot worse without her. But there's this kind of remembering in a way that doesn't actually sync up with reality that she likes to do, that makes it really difficult for me to get past the resentment. So I'm working on that.
What I also find is that when you have a lot of emotional burden as a child that it's hard for you to reflect on a childhood and see yourself as a little kid. Like you just were always a grown up. Has that been tricky in parenting as well? Like looking at your kids' lives and seeing how joyful they can be and experience things and to be fearless when you're confronted in some ways with the reality of your own childhood where you were unable to have access to that.
Yeah, it has been challenging, mostly because I sometimes feel like my instinct is to warn them, right?
Yeah.
So I feel very grateful that I have a partner who looks at life differently than I do, and he's a lot more funny and optimistic. And we've gotten to the point where he'll be like, "You're doing it. You're doing the thing again," and I have to kind of walk away and let things be.
So I'm going to circle back to this one question. What is something you admire in both of your parents?
My mom, I admire so much her positivity and her ability to always make the best out of difficult situations. Like she's just very good at that. It's come with other things, obviously, as we all have, but she has a lot of really close friends. She's very creative and she always sees beautifulness in everyone, right? She has that ability. And then my dad is just truly, he's a genius. I think if he would have focused in on any one of his passions for real and not been distracted, he probably also has ADD.
Okay.
It would have been a different, he's been seeking success and fame his entire life, and it's never quite come together for him. And I think a lot of that has to do with his own background and self-sabotage that he does. But he is incredibly talented at almost anything he picks up or touches or does.
I want you to compliment yourself on the parent you are because of the childhood that you had. What is it about your parenting now? How have you become a great parent because of the life you had as a child?
Well, I would never call myself a great parent. And I think that is because of the fact that my parents really wanted to be perceived as great. And it was a real challenge once we got to ages where we could see their fallibility and their inability to be perfect. So what I think makes me a great parent, if that is even possible, is that I am constantly checking myself and my ego and my conversations with my kids to remind them that I'm human. Because my biggest fear is that one day they're going to wake up and I'm going to do something. Because I remember these specific moments with both my parents and go, she's a big fat liar. And she doesn't actually care about my well-being. So I try to apologize a lot. I try to check myself a lot.
Wow, that's pretty profound. I never really thought about that. When you grow up with parents that consider themselves to be great, that sort of guru mentality and like the aftermath of that, that's interesting.
And to their credit, I think that was a lot of parents from that generation.
Yeah.
I really do. Parents who raised kids in the 80s, we weren't supposed to think of them as anything but great. It's just different upbringings, right? It's different ways that they raised us.
It's so funny too, because I think about their parents' generation and what they would have thought of hippies that considered themselves gurus when they were coming back from like the war.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, some of the conversations I saw my dad have with his mother would tell you that there was not a whole lot of respect there.
Yeah. Wow. Well, tell everybody about what you're working on in work right now, but also about the podcast.
Yeah. So I always have my hands in way too many places doing too many things, but I have a podcast called Stages of She, which is with two other co-hosts, and we talk to women about just the various things you're going through at different stages of life. I also have a blog, Womanhood Unwrapped, that you can follow on Instagram. And we have a website, we offer courses, and then just a ton of content for women on all kinds of topics, from anxiety to motherhood to growing in your career. And I also own Summary Content Marketing, where we're a real small agency, but we work with brands to tell their story online.
And then where can people follow you online?
Yeah, so you can follow me at Womanhood Unwrapped on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. It's probably the best place to follow me because I reference all my other projects there.
Well, thank you so much.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my most interesting guest, Liz, and remind everyone to make sure that they click subscribe to this podcast. Please leave a 5-star review. Join the Facebook group Reality Life with Kate Casey, where we can discuss this topic and more, all the more. And then also make sure you get my what to watch list at katecasey.substack.com. I will give you a list of what to watch in unscripted TV every week, and I'll make your life easier. You can get bonus episodes by going to my Patreon at patreon.com/Kate Casey. You can also follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KatecaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at Kate Casey. Check back Monday for a whole new list of what to watch this week, and then all week long for more interviews.
If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment cause chaos. Use ShipStation instead. From running a business out of your garage to multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating tasks. Plus, you'll get the best shipping rates from global carriers. Calm the chaos with the shipping software that delivers. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.